Oh, yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Well,
what does that say there, Jake?
so you may have heard there's been a little bit of a. If you listen to last week's episode, I don't think you would say that there was a clear winner, but over the course of the week, there have been developments, and as Dustin's entire frame says, he apparently believes that Dredd defeated Judge Dredd.
It was like unanimous, but you know what the most important thing was? Is there was a clear winner at the end of the episode. You agreed with me.
You tricked me.
And semantics.
Erroneous.
But I had to have
a
crown.
What does that say?
It says I win, and it says I am the law.
I am the law.
And then if you look up, I added some new things.
Dredd is the best.
Well, actually, it says Dredd is the second best because you and I both said that RoboCop is actually the best Judge Dredd movie. Over here, it says Dredd is the law. And down here is Carl is better than Sly.
That was one of the funnier things that I don't think one person caught on to that I'm aware of. In the memes I posted on social media this week, I kept calling him Keith Urban, not Carl Urban. And one person caught that and demanded that I respect Carl Urban's name, which I don't disrespect him. I just was, it was part of the thing.
Yep. So I win.
Well, congratulations.
I have crowned myself the winner, and that's what matters this week.
I'm very happy for you against my own better judgment, but you're right. It was unanimous. It was pretty hilarious how nobody was brave enough to even say anything positive about Judge Dredd. So I was all alone.
No, one person did comment that they thought the look of Mega City 1 was really good.
Yeah.
And that the costumes would have been even better had it not been for the giant cod piece.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I was like, oh shit, we didn't even joke about the giant cod piece.
Yeah, exactly. There was another guy who I think found us just through the hashtags. I don't think he was a listener, but he was obviously a Dredd super fan. He all of his photos were him in Dredd outfits, and but he had the most accurate comment, which was that the mood and story and everything of both of them were on and off, and the best Dredd is somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, I know it's been a rough week for you, Jake, but you have kept us entertained. Folks, if you are not following us on social media, I'm not one to really push the social media stuff a whole lot, but this would have been the week to follow us because it has been fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I took my pain out in memes, and turns out making memes is either super easy or super fun. Maybe both.
Both.
Because I felt pretty confident about how good they were.
Yeah. Oh, no, they were great. They were amazing.
Okay, so...
Well, what beer are you drinking, Jake? Oh, your video
today,
went down again.
Today is for today's episode. We're doing hidden gems, obviously, so I was looking for things that are hidden or partially hidden. So I went with Stealth Haze.
Okay.
It's a unfiltered, juicy IPA from Verboten Brewing here in Loveland, Colorado, and it's good. It's very good.
I remember Verboten. They had some pretty decent beers over there.
Yeah.
Well, I also tried to stick with somewhat of the theme, and I'm drinking Great Divide from Denver, Colorado. I'm drinking their Yeti Imperial Stout because Yetis are hidden. But I'm sure they'd be cool to see if they were real or actually out there or whatever. I probably wouldn't mess with one, though, because they strike me as the killing type, so...
Okay.
Yeah, so go drink Yeti by Great Divide. We're both drinking Colorado beers today, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And yes,
okay.
Yeti is good.
Yes,
I
it
didn't
was.
watch anything new. I have stressed myself so much with this goddamn episode that I thought was going to be so much fun and so easy,
Hmm.
and then it was a little overwhelming as I was texting you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't believe you, and I got a late start to it, and uh, it turns out you were right because all I did was keep adding about 50 movies to my list. And I was like, shoot, how do I get this to a top 10? I don't know. I don't know how it's possible. So I had to like force myself to just pick 10 I wanted to talk about. Saying that they're the top is kind of ubiquitous, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And
Yeah.
I'm tempted to switch in the middle of the episode and call an audible, so we'll see what happens.
Hey, man, we've done it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, this reminded me of like way back in the day when we first started and we were doing our comedy episode,
Hmm.
and there was just too many great comedies. I still have moments where I think back on that list, or I'll look back at my notes and shit, and I'm like, would that still be in my top 10? Do I want to like
Yeah.
swap any of these around? I'm like, no, maybe, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel the same way. I'm like, part of it, I'm like, what were you thinking? And then I'm like, no, I do really love it. It's so hard.
Yep,
I don't know.
yep. So that's why we keep coming up with all these top 10 episodes so that we can fit in some of these movies that
Yeah.
we wanted.
Yeah. And that's partly why we force ourselves to not include movies that have been on previous lists.
Yeah.
Because if we did, we'd just talk
I
about
gotta
those movies forever.
I gotta take the crown off. I'm used to wearing
But
hats, not fucking paper crowns made in 5 minutes. Not even 5 minutes.
I appreciate the effort, though.
But I thought you would appreciate the joke. I was like,
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
he's gonna laugh pretty hard when he logs on. I wonder if I can set it up here. Yeah, you can still see that it says I win. That's all that matters.
Yeah,
I just want it to be a constant
unfortunately.
reminder to you.
It is. It is. Unfortunately, I'm never going to live it down. I did watch a couple new things. So I tried watching House of Gucci,
Oh, okay.
and I stopped watching it because I was bored. It's
Oh.
just not for me. I love Ridley Scott. I love Adam Driver and a lot of the people in that movie, but it just wasn't for me. I did not care about that movie at all. So I watched The Boys instead, and
Oh,
The
dude,
Boys
that
is
show
great.
is badass.
Yeah. We binged the whole first season. I think we're in the middle of the second season right now. It's pretty awesome. I really enjoy it.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like thoroughly adult, which is also fun.
When I finally got around to watching it, I was very much in the same boat as you. Of like, oh, this is good. Like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
I had like heard so many good things I was a little bit nervous that I would be disappointed or it would be amped up too much, but it was really good.
yep.
And then I watched The Adam Project as
Oh, don't
well.
tell me
The
anything. I'm
new
watching it when Monica comes home this
Okay.
weekend. So,
It's fun. It's an enjoyable movie. The only thing I'll say about it, which isn't a spoiler or have anything to do with the movie really, but for all of you 13 going on 30 super fans like me, it's fun to see Mark Ruffalo and Jennifer Garner married in a movie together. It's a fun sequel.
and right there, everyone goes, no wonder Dustin won.
Yeah. That's also the funny thing, or like the hard thing, because my movie opinion, we've done almost 100 episodes.
Yeah.
We're in the 80s, I think. And and I feel like I've established I have a good movie taste in general. But now, as I'm putting this movie list together today, I'm like, well, I love this movie. This movie is great. And then I'm like, well, it may not be for everybody. And also, people are probably a little bit suspect of my movie taste at this point. So,
it's
I've lost a little bit of my standing, I think.
it's okay though, because as funny and passive aggressive and a whole bunch of shit talking that has been going around
Mhm.
this week, you did remind everyone, which I was like, it's a fun little reminder, folks. It's okay to like terrible movies. We all like terrible movies.
Yeah.
There's definitely a bunch of movies I absolutely love that every time I tell someone it, they're like, really? You like that
Yeah.
movie? Man, yeah. So I can't judge you too much.
Yeah.
I did feel bad for you at one point. It was like the final poll that you put up,
Hmm.
which judges better. And I was like, man, he's just asking for a beating. Like, Jake's gone masochistic this week.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem was, so I scheduled all those posts out. I like made them into like the beginning of the week and then scheduled them out to drop at certain times. And so there were several I was just waiting. I was like, that meme was so funny. I can't wait for people to see it. But it was like not coming out till Wednesday. Um, but yeah, it was like there were several of those things. And by the end of it, I was like, we don't even need to bother with the polls anymore. It's always been 100% or like 90%. And I'm the only one that voted the other way.
You don't even get a percent.
Yeah, it was rough. It was rough.
My favorite. Now, I've always loved the meme of the guy winning the medal celebrating by like spraying the champagne in his face. I've always loved that meme with pretty much everything
Yeah.
they've ever put on it. The one this week, obviously I'm biased, but that is my
Yeah.
favorite one because I was like, this might be the most accurate meme I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was my favorite as well, I think, mostly because I was able to put RoboCop at number one and
Yeah.
then Dread at number two. That was really funny. I enjoyed that thoroughly.
Oh man.
Okay,
Well,
but moving on, we're on to greener pastures. Today's episode is all about the hidden gems, uh, kind of movies that we think are great that may have
mhm.
been forgotten to time or not gotten the audience or whatever. Um, I think hidden gems might be my favorite category of movies in general because I always love finding a movie that either I've never heard of, that's great, or that other people haven't really found and known about, and then I get to say, "This movie's great, check it
Yeah.
out," and everybody's like, "Yeah, I agree." So hopefully that happens this week, and they're not like, "Wow, you suck."
Are you having a bit of a like crisis going on,
No,
Jake?
I'm moving on. I'm moving on. But I think it's one thing to watch like a major motion picture like Dune or the Batman, and obviously they're going to be good, and everybody in the world knows about
Mhm.
them, and that's good. Um, and I think, and I think on some level you expect it to be good because everybody knows about it. It's pretty safe. Like when you walk into it, you're like, this movie's going to be a pretty safe thing. I don't have to like sometimes when I go into movies, I like don't know if I should trust it yet or not. I'm like, is this going to be good or is this going to suck? And some movies I think are easier to trust because I'm just like, whatever you want to show me, I'm down.
Mhm.
Um, and so I also think that's why those big movies are more disappointing when they're not good because you did expect it. You're like, they marketed the shit out of it, everybody knows about it, and it's not good. So you kind of lied to me in a way. And I don't really get that with like hidden gem movies where I'm like, I'll try it. If it's good, that's great. But if it's not good, who cares? Like nobody told me it was good. I just kind
Right.
of hoped myself it would be. So it's fun.
Yeah. No, I love the hidden gems. Prepping for this one has been like a little over 3 weeks for me. And
Hmm.
I still forgot to watch so many. Well, not forgot to watch, but just got caught up watching so many other things and just kind of lost track.
Yeah.
Uh, but I did start thinking about like, man, when did my like fascination or just kind of extra special connection to these hidden gems and movies that don't get marketed, they don't gain it because some of them have huge casts, some of them have
Yeah.
amazing budgets, and they should have been huge pictures, and then they just
Hmm.
never went anywhere. Uh, but I really started thinking about it. And I was like, man, it really kicked in when I worked in high school when I was working at that video store because I got all the free
Yeah.
rentals. So it didn't matter. All I was losing was maybe 2 hours, and I just started watching all these movies that like no one was renting and no one knew about, and it's just always continued. So I get excited when I see like these unmarketed films that end up being great because then you feel, I guess, more validated as a movie lover or whatever. Or
Yeah.
you feel like, hey, I'm supporting all these people that made this because it's a cool movie. Um,
Yeah. And there are definitely stories and filmmakers that put a lot of time and effort into them, and they deserve that hype that they're
yeah.
not getting from like marketing companies. And so I think it falls to the fans, people like you who have just checked it out on a whim and love it and start telling people about it to spread the hype. And hype matters. Like
Yeah.
even though it's not initially successful, a lot of movies have become successful later because they had a cult following uh, or just over time built up that audience, and then they finally get the recognition they deserve after that. I mean, if you didn't have the fans, Star Wars would still be just a little indie sci-fi movie that came out, in the '70s. So that hype definitely matters.
Yeah, hype's always important. I also get really excited when like, or maybe it's a small niche of people. I always figure it should be more, but when we get big budget films or the huge blockbusters, that are very successful, I always think about, man, I hope fans walking out of that movie leave that movie thinking, I want to watch more of this guy's, like, his work. I want to see more of this director's work and start going
Yeah.
retracing steps back. Um, I get really excited about that. I know I've done that so many times where like I'll watch a movie,
Mhm.
get hooked on the character or the actor, and then I'm like, well, I just have to watch as much of their work as I can. And you come
Yeah.
across some like amazing films, and then you come across some like, wow, no wonder this one never went anywhere. Like,
Yeah. Oh, it's true.
but I love the hidden gem stuff, man. I think more people need to check it out. I will say that's one nice thing about the streaming these days is that they do
Yeah.
have a lot of the hidden gem kind of stuff. You can go online and find them, but I
Yeah,
guess
I
it
think
takes away the magic though of like going to the video store and renting it.
right. I had a similar thought this week because I was trying to think of what defines a hidden gem. If I'm going to make a list of my top
Mm-hmm.
10 hidden gems, what is that? And I noticed when I first thought of the ones that I thought would be on my list, I was like, it'll probably be a lot of '90s and early 2000s movies that people have forgotten about. Um, but for some reason, my list is primarily like around the 2018 era.
Oh, really?
I have four different movies from 2018 on my list, which is weird. And the more I was thinking about it, it might not be weird. I think part of that is because I suspect hidden gems will become more common
Mm-hmm.
because of streaming. Because before it was pretty uncommon to just drop a movie into theaters without marketing. If you're going to put it in theaters, you have to it takes a lot more. But I think nowadays with streaming, all of these streaming companies like Netflix and Hulu and Paramount and all these others are so hungry for content that they're making movies and then
Mm-hmm.
just dropping them on there so they can say, "Hey, we have all this new stuff coming out," and I don't think it's as hyped, and I don't think it's as known. It's people just check it out because they're like, "Oh, I like that actor, or I like that director, or the cover looks interesting."
Right.
Like, and that's sometimes why I watch a movie. I'm like, "Oh, that looks interesting," or the vibe of it is interesting. Um, and so I think that's we're going to have a lot of hidden gems with that. They're just dropping content on the streaming services all the time.
Yeah. Uh, I can honestly. Oh man, I think I have a pretty decent. Uh, nope. All of my list.
Mhm.
Oh no, I have one movie that's like older than 2014. I have one movie,
Oh wow,
but everything else has been within like, yeah, somewhere between 2010 and, well, maybe that one was 2008. I'll double check, but none of mine are in the 90s, which I, like you, thought,
yeah,
oh, I'm going to have a bunch of
yeah,
90s, and I don't. I did have one for the longest time, but then when I started rewatching all of the other ones that I kind of had a good feeling were going to be on my list, I was like,
yeah,
oh, damn it. You're going to
yeah,
get bumped for this one.
yeah. I do have a '90s one. It's actually my number 10, and part of the reason it's on my list is because as I put my list together, and I felt really good about it. I was like, these movies are all great. They're all interesting. And then I was like, but they all are pretty serious and dark and somewhat disturbing, and they're very very serious movies mostly. And so I was like, I need something more fun. I need
Mhm.
a at least one fun movie. And so my number 10 is a 1990 like action comedy that is a very fun movie.
My list is pretty well balanced. Actually, mine's very well balanced. I have no like just straight action, but I've got like it. I've got a decent list. I do my number 10 is probably the most serious on my whole list, and I was nervous to even have it because it's listed as a controversial film. Um,
Okay.
but it's one that's just always stuck with me because it makes you feel just.
Okay. Good. I'm glad you will balance me out then because I have several movies that are like, ugh, but they're great.
Yeah,
And so we'll have that balance. That's good.
yeah,
Okay. Do you want to get into it?
yeah, man. Let's do this. Hidden gems.
All
That.
right. I guess I guess I can go first since I've already hinted at my 1990 movie
All right.
as at number 10. Um, so I, I th- I don't even know how to set it up. Obviously, this was a difficult list to put together. I think this list would change more than any of our other lists
Go.
will change. Our top 10 drama is pretty set, but it still would change a lot. This will change more, I think. So I just chose this one that I love. I think it's fun. I think it's a good example of like the peak of these stars, especially together. So my number 10 movie is Bird on a
Oh
Wire
my
with
god.
Mel with Mel Gibson and Goldie Hawn, and it's just like it's a fun action comedy. If
Yep.
you liked Night and Day with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz, it's like that kind of where Mel Gibson it's like peak '90s Mel Gibson, and he and Goldie Hawn knew each other back in the day, but they've since disconnected and gone separate ways. He's been in witness protection. That's why he disappeared, and so she sees him. They get reconnected, but then are both on the run throughout the
Yep.
movie from these guys that just got out of jail, and their like chemistry is really really great. Um, they're really funny. Goldie Hawn is like I don't think there has ever been or will ever be someone who is both as funny and sexy and does her own stunts and like she's great. She's a gem in and of herself, I think.
Yeah, especially
Uh
in like the 90s and 80s. Well, 80s and 90s.
yeah. And there's a lot of like really interesting action in it. I was watching, I was like, that stunt is like pretty amazing. Like there's a scene where they're running away in a little plane that's being chased by a helicopter, but the way it's filmed, they're like right on each other, and they like do loops and stuff. It's a pretty intense like action movie in addition to just being a fun time. So definitely check it out, especially if you're a fan of Mel Gibson and Goldie Hawn. You notice things of like Mel Gibson's character, how he's like joking around and kind of unpredictable, a little bit crazy. I think it's is a precursor to Conspiracy Theory, which is another one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite movies, where his character is kind of like that as well. So yeah, check
Oh,
out Bird on a Wire. It's so fun.
Bird on a Wire is that's such a fun movie, and like no one's ever heard of it. So yeah, but I love that you brought it up. It's not on my list. I was like, I don't even know if I'll make it an honorable mention because at that point I was like, I've got like 50 honorable
Yeah.
mentions. I'm not allowed to do that. Uh, but Bird on the Wire, man, that was like I remember that was one of those movies I watched on like TBS as a little kid and just loved the action and the silliness of it because it's very silly and immediately bought it.
Yeah.
And I just watched it a couple weeks ago because I still have my copy and I'm like, this movie's so much fun.
Yeah.
Like so much fun. Oh, that's such a good pick, Jake. That's a great pick,
Thank you.
man. Well, unlike yours, which is fun
Yeah.
and silly and has some really entertaining, fun action sequences, my number 10 is about domestic terrorism. Uh,
All right. Yeah.
um, I would say this movie's not for everyone, and I'm kind of I'm kind of bummed now that I have it on my list, considering the idea that you sent me earlier today. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I think this would work better on that list. So I think I have to call an audible.
Oh no. I was about to say that was an option.
Well, you already said you're probably going to call an audible as well this episode. I think we've
Yeah.
done it a few times. So I am. I'm going to save this one
Okay.
for that other list idea that you had, or like just the episode
Yeah.
idea. We'll tell you about it later, folks. Um, I'm
Way
audibling
to
it.
tease them.
Yeah. All right. So my new number 10, this came out in like 08, 09. It's one of the most unique. Oh, and it's no longer domestic terrorism. This one's just fun.
Okay. I thought it was fun domestic
No,
terrorism.
no, no. That sounds fucked up. Oh, it came out in 2010. Sorry.
Okay.
It's one of the most unique looking movies I've ever seen. There are times in this movie where I prefer this style over like Sin City style. It's not all black and white, but it has a very heavy comic book feel. Actually, the movie feels like if you had a giant pop up comic book and every time you turned it, that's how the movie feels. So,
Yeah.
my number 10, I have to like remember to say 10 because I'm audibling live,
Yeah.
is a movie called Bunraku. It's with Josh
What the
Hartnett,
fuck?
Woody Harrelson, Demi Moore, and Ron Perlman. This movie is a fucking trip. It has a very basic storyline of like this drifter comes into this town that's ran by this crime lord who's
Okay.
called the Hatchet Man, who like controls all the citywide activity. Uh, and he's got like his main assassins. His number two is literally named Number Two. He's this like
Mm.
super famous, really good killer who also turns his murders into a kind of dance, which is
Okay.
really interesting. But the characters are so unique. They're so much fun. Josh Hartnett playing like the drifter, gruff, kind of violent type fighter. Oh, and there's a samurai in the story as well that he ends up
Yeah.
fighting and teaming up with. But I'm like, man,
Okay.
Josh Hartnett does this kind of
Mm.
role so perfectly. It reminds me of like his role in this reminds me of a more serious version of his character in Lucky Number 11.
Yeah.
That's what his character reminds me of, like a drifter version of that. And
Okay.
Bunraku is just, it's so odd. And you can't really like, trying to explain the whole story will just get too much. So it's a drifter that
Mm.
comes to town. He's got some business. And Woody Harrelson plays a bartender who's kind of like, it's like a Western, but it's like a comic book, samurai Western. It's odd, but I love this
Do you know if
movie.
it's based on like an anime
No,
or
it's not.
something?
It's a complete, just
Okay.
all original idea, all original, which is another like, hey, this is incredible because the imagination to it is a blast. A lot of
Yeah.
like little details in it. You can see where there's a lot of like homages to other films like Kill Bill. There's some parts in it that you're like, I wonder, I have to think that's inspired by Kill
Yeah.
Bill. Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, Bunraku. If you like comic book movies, you should watch it, even though it's not based on any comic book. But it
Yeah.
makes you feel like you're just dropped into the panels. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
I love Bunraku.
Okay. Well, I'll be getting that because I never heard of it until just now. I'm curious how many of mine you haven't seen, if any. And I know there will be several on your list I have not seen.
Probably. That just
Okay.
happens, folks.
Mine,
That just happens.
it does. It does. And it's one of my favorite things because there are a lot, like I said, I love finding hidden gems and good movies that I haven't seen before, especially older ones that I don't have to wait for them to come out.
Yep.
So my number 9 is when we start to get a little bit serious and a little bit darker. Um, like you said about your last one, I'm not calling it audible because it is a great movie, and I think it's more of it's a hidden gem. I think for a weird reason too,
Okay.
where if you go to like IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes or anybody, it has a really low rating, and I think that people say that it's very generic and boring, but I think it's actually really good. And this was one of the ones that I was like, people may think that my opinion is suspect at this point, but I do think it's really good. I do think it's interesting and original in several different ways. So you should check it out. So my number 9 is Night Hunter with Henry Cavill, Ben Kingsley, Alexander Daddario, Stanley Tucci, and it's dark and serious because Henry Cavill plays this guy. He's a dad of this young girl who's like divorced from his wife, and he is also a cop, like an FBI investigator detective, who is primarily investigating like human trafficking, kidnapping of young girls. So obviously, very depressing line of work. And my favorite part, though, is Ben Kingsley is like a vigilante who's simultaneously doing that also, where he's come up with this really interesting system where he's working with this young girl to try to lure perverts into meeting with her. And then when he does, when they get him back into like a hotel room, then he like pops out and smashes them in the head with a bat and delivers justice to them in a very fun way. And that's an interesting thing that I don't think you see ever, is like a vigilante that's like trying to do things, and they're not working with the cops. They're like doing the same thing the cops are doing, but they're like, the cops are 2 steps behind these people because they're like proactively trying to find and catch these people, and the cops are, I guess, investigating crimes that have happened in the past, and they're kind of just like on cold cases and stuff. Okay. So I think it's really interesting. Henry Cavill is awesome. He's always awesome. And the story itself, I think it's great and better than people give it credit for, especially critics. That it's definitely darker in tone and content, but I think the content is interesting and also a kind of story that you don't hear told much. I think it's told in a good way that's not gross for grossness sake, but it's realistic and worth telling. So I think it's a cool, interesting movie.
I was just looking it up.
It's a lot of people like compare it to like Seven as like a crime thriller like that, and I don't think that's fair to compare it to one of the greatest movies of all time. But it's a really good movie in its own right. It's not Seven, but it's really, really good.
Oh man, you just reminded me. I have a rant that I want to do on our show. Probably not today.
Okay.
But I have a rant prepped. And you just reminded me. No, I'm looking up this movie. It looks interesting. Henry Cavill looks like a fucking rugged beast in this movie.
Yeah. It's jacked Henry Cavill with a beard, which makes him even more jacked somehow.
Yeah, it was funny kind of just looking at some of the comments. There's a couple that are like, I hate this movie. And then there's a couple that are like, this movie's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that one out. I have not seen that one, nor
okay.
have I heard of that one. And I feel weird for not having even heard of that one.
It's one of those ones that I think I added to my queue because I liked the cover and I like Henry Cavill, obviously. Yeah. And I was like, I feel like I'll like it based on the vibe. And then I ended up really liking it. It was one of those pleasant surprise kind of things.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that one out. Well, my number 9 is actually on the fun side. Now,
nice.
I actually have 2 movies in this genre on my list because I'm a sucker for them, and they're always fun. And this one I love the premise. So my number 9 is one that like no one's ever heard of. More people should have. If you like heist films, you should check this movie out because it's just fun. It's called Flypaper.
Okay.
It's with Ashley Judd and Patrick Dempsey. And it is about 2 bank heists happening at the same time at the same bank by accident. So you have one team that's like highly professional. They have all the crazy gadgets and tools, and they're like masked up, black all over, huge assault. You know, they got the weapons, they got everything. And then the other people robbing the bank are 2 rednecks who are kind of dumb. Like they're just they just walk in, guns wielding, just like they don't hide their faces. They don't try to do anything. And the
Yeah.
two bank robberies end up taking the bank tellers and whatever customers are still in the bank. They take them hostage. And the whole movie is just about these two sets of thieves trying to work together to rob the same bank, but do their own thing and stay out of each other's way. And then the hostages all trying to deal with that. It's a comedy, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's fun. It's not one that you're going to laugh out loud throughout the whole thing. Your sides aren't going to hurt from laughing too hard, but it's one of those movies where every time I watch it, I think I smile more and more by the end of it, where I'm like, it puts me in a good mood. It's silly. It's
Mhm.
just enjoyable as fuck. It never tries to get too complicated. It kind of makes fun at being overly complicated at one point, but that's part of like just the humor of the story. Because Patrick Dempsey
Yeah.
plays he's one of the customers who just happens to be in the bank when it gets robbed, and he's like
Mm.
OCD. He's a little neurotic. He's super eccentric. He's like all over the place. And Ashley Judd plays the teller that he's kind of infatuated with, and so she's trying to deal with him. And it's just a fun movie. Like, it's just a good movie, and no one's ever heard of it. No one realized it got made, and I'm like, man, if you like Ashley Judd, you should definitely watch it.
Yeah.
If you like Patrick Dempsey, we're looking at you, Grey's Anatomy folk. You should
Yeah.
definitely watch it. It's a good movie because it's so pleasant. Like, it's one of the most pleasant films ever, and you're gonna laugh. You will laugh. So, Flypaper,
Nice.
yes.
Yeah, I'd never seen it before. I didn't remember the name, but I have seen that cover before, so I remember being intrigued by it, but I never got around to it.
Yeah, it's just when I watched it again this week, it was originally I was like, oh, that'll be an honorable mention. Like, but I'll
Mm.
rewatch it. Halfway through, I was like, oh no, this is on my list. Like, this has to be on my list.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Um, okay, my number eight. uh, I'm listing this movie lower not because it's not as good as the rest, but because I think it's less hidden than the rest. So my number eight is, I think, a little more known,
Okay.
but is one that I think is so often forgotten, and I wanted to bring it up, and I don't think we've talked about on the show before. Um, so it was a good time to. I thought it's a great kind of gangster movie, a British gangster movie, which I know that you love. I'm sure you have seen this
I
movie
think I already know
because
what
it's
movie
one
you're
of the
talking
more.
about.
So Layer
Yep, I
Cake
knew what
from
movie you were talking
2004.
about.
Yeah, and it's great, especially if you love Matthew Vaughn, who directed it, and he did obviously all of the Kick-Ass and Kingsman and all of that stuff. Um, it's just a really fun British gangster movie, especially if you like Daniel Craig and how he became James Bond. This is kind of a precursor to that. One of the main things that got
Like
him into it.
100%. He did Layer Cake and then got cast as Bond.
Yeah, and it's really fun to watch it with that like in mind because his character in Layer Cake, he works with Tom Hardy and they kind of like cut drugs for this mob boss guy. But he's averse to guns. He doesn't do violence or guns at all. And so through the course of the story, once he does pick up a gun and he's like holding it and going outdoors and stuff, you're like, you're so James Bond, dude. Like it's obvious. Yeah. So Layer Cake's just a really fun movie. It's a full throttle gangster like movie about these guys. I wish Tom Hardy was in it more. That's the only thing that every time I watch it, I'm like, Tom Hardy, that's awesome. A little underutilized, but otherwise, it's a great movie.
Yeah, I fucking love Layer Cake. It's so good. Uh, I would say for people that are big fans of like Guy Ritchie fans, Layer Cake is in that
Yeah,
same vein, but it's
yeah,
done differently. So it's a little more linear storytelling. It's a little more
mm,
straightforward than what Guy Ritchie's known
yeah.
for, or at least just visually. But oh man, that's such a good pick. I don't have it on my list
Okay.
because I feel like you were already gonna have it. So I figured
Oh
that should
wow.
be all right. Figured if he doesn't have it, we'll make it an honorable mention. But I just like it got bumped for so many other movies. At this
Yeah,
moment, it could be
understandable.
on the list, but it was another one of those where I was like, "Oh my god, layer cake!" Pulled it out and was like, "No, you have like 50 movies sitting out right now. You got to put one back."
Yeah. Yeah, it's the struggle.
Dude, layer cake is so good. As soon as you were like British, like or mafia movie, like or crime movie, like oh, it's layer cake,
Yeah.
1000%. So good. Welcome to the layer cake, son. I can't do a British accent. I'm not gonna try.
Yeah, obviously.
Fucking asshole. Hey Jake. How'd this week go for you?
Oh,
How'd the
shut
other week
up.
go for you?
Let's just move on. Let's just move on.
Yep. What movie? Number 8.
8.
All right. So we kind of hinted to it earlier. Well, we kind of just talked about it. You just kind of did it with layer cake, and I'm going to do it with this one where like people see the big, super high profitable film in the theater or whatever, the big budget, the blockbuster. And hopefully they go back and rewatch like previous work, maybe a little lesser known
Mhm.
work by those actors. Mine was not with the Batman, but mine was with like the Lighthouse, which, as everyone who knows me
Yeah.
knows, I am obsessed with that goddamn movie. Obsessed with it.
Mhm.
But this movie ended up, I had always wanted to watch it, especially after seeing The Lighthouse, and was curious about it. And then we got lucky on our first random 10 or second random 10 episode,
Yeah.
and it popped up for me to watch on that spin. And I fucking fell in love with this movie so much. And it's just so like, it's so good. And I do recommend this movie to pretty much everyone. Anyone who brings up Robert Pattinson to me anymore, this is like the first movie I
Mhm.
drop. Obviously, now that he's Batman, it's the second movie I'll drop. but
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but this is a movie that made Robert Pattinson the Batman. This was like why they wanted him. So my number 8 is Good Time.
Yeah.
And I know I already talked to you about it on that random 10 episode. So I'm including it now because that was a random 10. That wasn't a top episode. So it still works for me to have it on my list. Loophole. Uh, dude, Good Time is so, it's intense. You are
Mhm.
sucked into this brother's like whole night of just trying to figure out how he's going to bust his deaf brother out of prison. Like, how is he going to
Okay.
rescue his brother? Uh, I also am a big fan of movies where there's like no real good guys, or they make you kind of have to root for the bad guy. And Good Time does that
Yeah.
because, you know, Robert Pattinson plays this older brother who, him and his younger brother, they're criminals running from the law. His younger brother gets caught in the beginning, and he spends the rest of the movie
Mhm.
trying to figure out how is he going to bust his brother out. But he's a criminal. Like, they're bad guys. And it's just the
Yeah.
journey that this whole night goes through. It only takes place during like the night, but it feels like this fucking huge just runaway train. And I love it when movies do that, where the timeline's actually very short, but it makes you feel like
Yeah.
you have been just sucked into this for so long. It's intense. Robert Pattinson, guys, like, we got to move on from Twilight. The dude is so good.
Yeah.
He's so fucking good. And I've become such a huge fan of his over time, and I can't wait for what else he does. I hope he does more movies like Lighthouse and like Good Time, uh, along with the Batman
Yeah.
shenanigans that he's got planned with Matt Reeves, because I'm sure that's going to get wild. But Good Time is just, it was one of those movies, and a lot of the movies on my list are on my list because they were all the movies where that first viewing, they just hit that perfect chord where you just like, as
Yeah.
a movie fan, you know when that happens, when you're like, oh, this is one of those.
Yeah.
Like,
You're like, I love this. This was made for
right.
me.
Well, Good Time is one of those for me, and it was fun for me because of how much I love The Lighthouse, and I had that same thought during that movie. So to have it happen twice with the same actor is always like, fuck yeah. So
Nice.
Good Time is my number 8.
Yeah, I've had it on my list to get around to since you had that random 10, and I haven't yet, uh, but I've been meaning to. I also was so close to having a Robert Pattinson movie on
Oh
my list,
shit.
though. Um, it was actually the one that inspired me to pull it off and text you about that other idea, because like this movie is great, but not for everybody, and I don't think I should recommend it in this episode. So we need to do a future episode about that.
Well, now my curiosity is way up there.
You didn't tell me you're number 10. I'm
It's
not going to tell
true.
you
That's
this
true.
one.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll play fairly.
All right. So my number 7 is a heist movie, kind of like you had a heist movie, covering all the bases. And this one is it's a little more fun. It's not dark like the other ones that I mentioned, so that's a good balance as well. And one of the most fun things about it is it's based on a true story. So it's called American Animals, and it's about these. Have you seen
No,
it?
but
You're
I
nodding your head
have
as if you
wanted to
know what it
watch
is.
that movie for so long, and I just haven't gotten around to it.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's about these kids that go to college and for no real reason. Like they're going to college, they have like are come from, well enough off families and just decide that they need some notoriety. They need to do something to be remembered. They need like more meaning in their
Mhm.
life than what they're doing. So they decide to rob the school library that has like these rare books in it. And so they put together this heist of their school library. And it's fun because they splice in like interviews with the actual guys who were the kids that actually did this. I think it's in Kentucky. And, uh, and the style of the movie is really uh, fun, interesting, and cool. And so it's just one of those movies that it's not like, it's not crazy. It's not violent. It's not anything too like severe in any respect. It's a pretty just good standard movie, right in the middle, but really enjoyable and really fun, especially if you like kind of stylized heist
Mhm.
movies of these wannabe heisters. It's kind of fun.
I I remember seeing the trailer for this, and this is another like I am not known for watching trailers, especially when I buy a movie. If they have the trailers, I'm like hitting that menu key or skipping it, whatever. If the disc allows you to or whatever, don't care about them unless I'm
Yeah,
watching like these hidden gem style movies. Then I will watch all the trailers on it because you get all the
yeah,
trailers that are also potential like super hidden gems or movies like no one is ever going to hear about. And American
yeah.
Animals was on, I forget which one it was. And I remember watching that trailer and just being like, oh, I feel I have to watch this movie. And then I just haven't gotten around to it. Which has also made me think,
Nice.
Jake, we haven't done it since season one. But doing
Yeah.
another episode of 10 movies we've
Oh
always
yeah.
wanted to watch, we just haven't gotten around to because I know you and I have millions upon millions of those. So,
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a good idea. I'll make sure we do that.
but I like that you and I both have heist films on our list. It's,
Yeah.
folks, this is why we have a show together because we typically are going to share a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
Oh, man. All right. My number 7 is a coming of age film, as it were, as they call it. Um,
Okay.
I also so this movie has my personal favorite Sam Rockwell performance and character that he's ever done is in this movie. It's also a great movie if you're a big fan of Steve Carell to watch because Carell plays someone so polar opposite of what everyone knows him as, where like he's supposed to be the funny, make you feel great about yourself kind of character. Well, he's a complete fucking dickhead in this film. He is a horrible human being in this movie. But it
Okay.
just goes to show like Carell has incredible range. I think he's
Yeah,
underestimated in how much range he actually has. But anyways, so
definitely.
my number 7 uh, is it's such a like relevant film to me. I feel like All of us as kind of people are really the main character, who's this like 14-year-old boy. So the movie is called The Way Way Back, and it's with Steve Carell,
Yeah.
Sam Rockwell, Tony Collette, and I forget the kid that plays the main character. But anyways, it's about this 14-year-old boy who goes on a summer vacation with his mom, her boyfriend, and her boyfriend's daughter. Carell plays the boyfriend, and Collette plays his mom. And over the course of the summer, this kid like gets a job at this local water park, and Sam Rockwell's the manager there. He just kind of interacts with him. And Rockwell is this guy who just kind of helps the kid cope, helps the kid kind of grow up, kind of like boosts him a little bit. But he doesn't do it in a super forceful, obnoxious kind of. I mean, he's kind of obnoxious, but it's not a horrible obnoxiousness. Like there's a point to it. There's a huge piece of fun to it, and just realistic aspect of it. But it's such a
Yeah.
feel good film, even with all the shit that the kid like goes through. And I was watching it, and I was like, man, I feel like everyone, but I'll just not generalize. I'll just say me, just because that's who I am. I'm like, I think we all need
Yeah.
Sam Rockwell's character. I think we all need this guy in all of our lives, because he's so good at like making this kid realize it's okay to have fun, and just like remember to get out of your mopiness here and there. Like having a bad day is okay. Just,
Yeah.
you got to go and do something. It's just,
Mhm.
it's such an enjoyable film. I love this movie so much. And like the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, it's pretty good. Watch again, I was like, oh, I really like this. And it just kept like growing on me. And the soundtrack to it
Yeah.
is perfect. It's so perfect. It's just, but yeah, this movie is my favorite Sam Rockwell piece. Nothing against any of his other roles or performances, because he's great. But there's
Yeah.
just something about this one that feels like he's needed. So I think more people need to watch this movie just to watch him, so they can get a sense of like, hey, maybe we should all get over some of our crap. Not like all of it, which is what I appreciate, because you still got to work through a lot,
Yeah.
but like baby step kind of stuff. But yeah, Way Way Back is so good. It's such a great film.
Yeah. I think this is the first one that we've both
Oh,
seen, because I
sweet.
have seen Way Way
Yes.
Back. Yeah. And it is really, really good. I agree with everything that you said. The only thing I would add is I love Sam Rockwell, especially because this kid, like you said, it's a coming of age story, and he's adolescence, he's
Oh,
awkward,
he's
he's
so awkward.
struggling to figure out who he is, and so he doesn't really have a good
Yeah.
father figure. And Sam Rockwell, who's this reckless manager of a water park, kind of becomes an unexpected father figure in an unexpected way, and they do bond
Yeah.
really well together. I love
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy you've seen it, Jake. Because like every time I watch it, I'm like, the world needs this movie right now, like some kind of movie vigilante. But
it. I think that's really true though. I like that a lot. That this is a movie that the world needs to see and take a message
yeah,
from, and they'll be in a better place if
I
they do.
really like completely believe that this is one of those movies that I'm like, this is so poignant. Like we need this movie right now. So folks, go watch The Way Way Back. It's so good.
Okay, my number six. I'm sure you have seen as well, but it's one of those movies that I love that I occasionally hear people mention, very rarely, and most people are like, "What's that? What's this? When did this come out? Who the heck are these people?" So, and it's a really cool movie, especially if you like action movies, gunfights, especially realistic gunfights like Heat, um, and if you like just a fun buddy action movie like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. So my number six is The Way of the Gun from 2000 with Ryan Felipe and Benicio del Toro and Juliette Lewis. It's so cool and so good. And if you like returning to creators' earlier work, Christopher McQuarrie, this is the first movie he directed. He wrote Usual Suspects before this, but he wrote this also and directed this in the first movie that he was able to direct. Since then, he's obviously done Jack Reacher, Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, and Fallout. Top Gun Maverick, The Mummy. Apparently, he only works for Tom Cruise generally.
Well, there's a common denominator in a bunch of those movies, Jake.
Yeah, I see that now. But Tom Cruise is not in this movie. It is Ryan Felipe and Benicio del Toro, though, and they are basically like the 2000 version of Butch and Sundance, where they're these two guys that are not heroes. They're bad guys, but they kind of end up in this situation where they choose to become heroes to save this girl. There's Juliette Lewis plays this girl who's a surrogate mother. She's pregnant for this rich guy, and she like kind of gets away, and so he's trying to get her back. And these two guys kind of like try to help her out, try to choose to not do their own thing, not make a bunch of money, but do the right thing. And it's really, really cool. The best part though is all of the like shootouts, all of the car chase is one of the most interesting car chases I've ever seen, where they actually like it's slow. They'll like hop out of the car, let it roll forward. They're standing behind cover and like shooting back at the bad guys, and then they jump back in the car. It's crazy. It's so fun, and like everything about the shootouts is like very realistic, like on the level of being referenced today. Like it was kind of ahead of its time because old like cops and military and stuff were in 2000 were still like kind of teaching the old stuff, and this was all very like kind of cutting edge tactics and all that stuff that holds up to this day really well. So it's really cool. Such a fun
movie. Honestly can't remember if I've actually seen it or not, but I know what movie you're talking about, and I feel like I did see it because I've got like some flashes of it, like when you were talking. But I feel like I need to rewatch it just to confirm if I've seen it or not. If I'm having a hard time remembering if I've seen it, chances are I probably only saw bits and pieces and just never finished it. Because that came out when we were in high school, right?
2000, so probably a little before.
Yeah,
I do that sometimes where I'm like, I've seen that, right? And I'm like, no, I probably just saw the trailer.
I remember the
poster or something because I don't remember any of this.
It sounds and looks so familiar. I'm watching the trailer right now.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it, but I think it's been so long that it might be one of those that just got lost in the ether. But I need to revisit that one. I always get excited about movies that you bring up that I'm like, ooh, yeah. And then I rewatch it and I'm like, yeah. Like I did that with Seven Psychopaths a while back. You had that on one of your lists, and I rewatched that and was like, fuck, this movie's so much better than like even Jake brought up. And I agree with you on everything about the sequel. I think we need 8 Psychopaths, but discussion for another day. Yeah, good pick, man. I need to rewatch it. Well, my number 6 was the one that I was texting you today, actually, about of like, I think I might have one that might bump or not. It did end up bumping this one.
Okay.
Because rewatching it, I was just like, yeah, this just hits everything I love about the horror genre. I love like drama, and I love slow burns. I like just letting the story flesh itself out. I think my only complaint about this movie is that I wish it would have been longer than just the hour and a half that it is. I would have loved like a full 2 hour just mental torture fest that this movie ends up becoming. But I'm kind of fucked up in the head when it comes to this stuff. This was one of those movies where like I know people have seen it. Obviously, people have seen all the movies we're talking about, but every time that I mention it to someone, no one has a clue of what I'm talking about. So that's like my whole list. That's how I based my hidden gems of if I bring up the title, how many people actually know what I'm talking about? And like, no one has heard of any of these movies that are on my list, which sucks because they deserve audiences. But I'm a big sucker, as you know, Jake. Whenever I see like an article or any kind of marketing, especially for horror, where they're like scariest movie ever, this movie like made people
Yeah,
cry or pass out or have heart attacks or throw up, and I'm like immediately just
yeah,
well, challenge accepted. I'm there. This was one of those.
yeah.
It popped up on I think my Facebook feed as a hidden gem. Like that was the name of the
Okay.
article, horror hidden gem on Netflix, was making people like super squeamish and having to throw up because it was just too much for them. And like, okay, let's
Hmm.
watch it. Like sit down with my popcorn and eat. And I've
Yeah.
talked about it before with you. I think it was even an honorable mention maybe a long time ago on one of the lists. But anyways, uh, the Autopsy of Jane Doe is one of
Yeah.
the best horror films I've seen in a long time. It's intense. It takes its time. I love the whole story of like the father son coroner team. The son's trying to like
Hmm.
learn from his dad, but still have a life outside of it. His dad's old and kind of like, well, I need you here. Like, you got to know this stuff. I need to, like, because my time's coming to an end. They do a great job of hinting to like the past without being too overblown on it. All the horror aspects with Jane Doe that come to play, I think is played out really well. The detective work in it is one of my favorite investigation horror genre. Always does an investigation, like
Yeah.
where's the ghost or spirit coming from? Why are they doing what they're doing? We found a way to defeat them. Oh shit, we didn't defeat them, right?
Yeah.
Detective
Yeah.
work in Autopsy of Jane Doe, I think, is one of the better like investigations because it's all in one room and the father and son end up having to do it just because like there's nothing else to do. And it does a good job of giving you
Hmm.
the clues of like opening up the story more and more and just hitting you at the last 20 minutes with just like holy shit. But I've become obsessed with Autopsy of Jane Doe. It's like it's not a scary movie, but it's just a really well made horror film. I love the story. I love everything about it, and I think it deserves a big audience. I this movie, I every time I watch it, I'm like, if this was on the big screen, this movie
Yeah.
probably would have made people freak the fuck out. Like people would have been uncomfortable because there's close up shots of them like cutting the ribs, opening up the
Hmm.
torso, cutting the skull off. Like it's an autopsy.
Yeah.
It's gross.
Right.
But I love this movie so much. And when I was rewatching it today before we started recording, I was like, okay, is this one actually on the list or is this one gonna bump? It's like it's gonna bump. It's gonna bump. I love this movie just too much.
Yeah, Autopsy of Jane Doe is, you're right. I hear, I see a lot of articles that are like, this movie, this horror movie is amazing. It's so scary. It came out of nowhere. It's all this stuff. And it's usually just
Yeah.
marketing. It's usually like, it's fine. It's average. It's generic. But I do remember Autopsy of Jane Doe being one of the ones that was surprisingly good. Like, I was like, oh, this is actually a really good, underappreciated horror
It's
movie.
just well made. I think of all the movies that I've seen that marketing with that actually like it didn't scare me, but it affected me, and I know it did the same to you and like to
Hmm.
Christy, was Hereditary. Now my heart palpitations,
Yeah.
like I didn't have a heart attack watching it, but it's the first movie where
Mhm.
as I'm eating popcorn, due to a certain scene in that film, I could not eat my popcorn for like the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen to me. It was just so like
Yeah.
abrupt.
Yeah. Yeah. That part of why I love that movie is because it made me feel that fear or dread in a way I've not felt since I was a
Right.
kid,
It's like,
basically.
oh, this is hopelessness right here. This is what this feels like. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And then with like such significant gravity that I don't think you get from like a normal
Yep.
horror movie, because it's like these are like just serious adult themes. Like, how do you deal with moving on from that? That's crazy. But this is not about
No,
Hereditary.
no. But yeah, so Autopsy of Jane Doe. I fucking love that movie. And
Yeah.
I one of the reasons why it was like, yeah, this has to be on my list. I'm such a lover of the horror genre to not have one on my
Yeah.
list felt weird. And then I was like, okay, we feel normalized now because I've got gore on my list. Yes.
Yeah. Good. I know that was kind of like the weird thing. I was like, I don't have any like I wanted like a really good comedy, and I was like, I just didn't fit. I couldn't fit them all on there. Okay, my number five is one of the most hidden of gems that I think is still looked over so much today. Partly for a good reason because it is wild, it's crazy, it's confusing, partly as well. But overall, I think it's kind of brilliant at the same time. And so, especially if you want to see, speaking of early works of big actors, if you want to see one of the most interesting performances from Dwayne The Rock Johnson, you should check out this movie.
Don't say
So my
Doom.
number
Don't say
five is
Doom.
it's not Doom, unfortunately. Uh, my number five is
Oh,
Southland
that's such a
Tales.
weird fucking movie. That's such a weird
It's
movie.
weird. It's so weird,
Oh,
but I love it more and more. It's one of those movies that I love more and more the more I watch it because partly I think I get it more and more, but it's so complicated and it's told in such a choppy
yeah.
way that is very confusing that things just kind of jump around in a way. But the overall story, if you let it happen to you and you let it just go where it's going to go, I think it's very interesting. So it's a science fiction
Mm-hmm.
movie about this future where towns in Texas have been attacked by nuclear missiles, and so the entire American government has kind of responded by expanding. So it came out in 2006, and so it's very much a commentary on like 9/11 and the national security and how far will the government go to expand their control of like national security and all that stuff and like surveillance and all that. So everybody's surveilled constantly. It's kind of Orwellian in that sense, but it's also a pretty accurate predictor of today where there's like the rise of the social media influencer. So Sarah Michelle Gellar plays like an ex porn star who's now like a social media influencer before that was even a thing. And she is working on producing this movie that Dwayne Johnson is also producing, and they have a script for it. And the script is like predicting the end of the world in a way. And so there are these like neo-Marxist faction of terrorists uh, who are trying to get the script from him. One of the best things about it is how every actor in the movie is so like against type
Yeah.
in a way, and I think the director actually like actively tried to cast them that way. So it was written and directed by Richard Kelly, who did Donnie Darko and The Box, and The Box is very interesting also. But he chose like Dwayne Johnson and Sarah Michelle Gellar and Sean William Scott. And a bunch of comedians that you know and love, like Sherry O'Terry and Janine Garofalo and John Lovitz, um, and Amy Poehler, and they all are just like kind of against type characters or caricatures in the movie, and so it's a wild ride. It's the kind of sci-fi that I like, where it's actually the more I was watching it, I was like, this is kind of like it's kind of like if Idiocracy took itself a little more seriously or a lot more seriously. It's kind of like that, where it's this version of the future that feels like the future, but also is a warning sign of where it
Mm-hmm.
could go. So I think it's a very uh, it does a very noble job of trying to achieve a bigger scope, even if it's does it in a complicated way. But I think it also kind of works for today, where everything is with social media and everything's just kind of things are thrown at you constantly, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I feel like this movie ages better and better over time. So check out Southland
So I
Tales.
looked it up on IMDb, and I always
Yeah.
get a kick out of because IMDb always puts the like the genres next to it.
Mhm.
This one has every genre except horror. I love it when they do that.
Yeah.
I will have to.
Like, we don't know
I
what
will
this
have to
is.
revisit it. I was not the biggest fan of it the first time I saw it. I have watched
Yeah.
it a few times, and every time I watched it, I never hated it. I just always felt like, what the fuck is this movie? It's so fucking weird. I will have to revisit it
Yeah.
though, because I do like The Box a lot. You and I have talked about
Yeah.
that. That movie's ridiculous, but in a very, for us, like, it's not for everyone, but it's an interesting movie.
Yeah.
But I'll have to
Yeah.
check that movie out. I never hear anyone mention that name. I can't believe, like, of all the random fucking movies you have, you know what? I take that back. It's got Dwayne Johnson. Of course you watched it. Of course you
Yeah.
watched it.
As Dwayne Johnson and John Lovitz is like a badass
I was
cop.
waiting for you to be like Walking Tall, which is actually not that bad of a movie.
The Rundown
The
is
Rundown
better,
is
in
way
all
better.
honesty. Yeah.
But this is not an episode about Dwayne Johnson's early career.
Yet.
Yet. But, oh man, Southland Tales is so fucking weird. What number are we on, man?
Yeah.
5? All right.
5, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Number 5, like you, is one of the weirdest movies I've ever watched. Unlike you,
Nice.
the weirdness in my movie is hilarious and so absurd that you just can't help but enjoy it for what it is. But my number 5 is also a movie about like the desperate need for connection, like human connection, friendship, whatever, love, all of it. My number 5 is with Paul Dano, who newer audiences will know him as the current Riddler in the Batman. He's awesome.
Yeah. Phenomenal actor.
He's a very good actor. That dude he's got some of the best roles. If you ever want to see my personal favorite of his, you got to watch the movie Little Miss Sunshine. He plays the older brother in that movie. That performance is so fucking intense because he's silent like the whole movie. But it's an intense performance. But anyway, so this has Paul Dano in it, and it has everybody's favorite wizard, this poor guy. I was just talking to my daughter about Daniel Radcliffe, and I was like, this poor dude hasn't been Harry Potter for like 15-ish years, something like that. But that's all anyone still knows him as. She was like, that sucks. Does he do anything else? And I was like, the dude does tons of shit. No one knows it.
Yeah.
Because he does all these independent films, low-budget films.
Right.
But this is Daniel Radcliffe, like, at his best from what I've watched so far, because it looked like he was having the most fun with it, and it's the most awkward. So Paul Dano plays a guy stranded on an island, ready to kill himself.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And Daniel Radcliffe plays a corpse that washes up on the beach.
And hilarity
ensues. Folks, Swiss Army Man. I can't believe I consider it hidden gem because, like I said earlier, every time I bring it up to someone, everyone is always like, never heard of it. What is that? But I remember seeing marketing for it. I remember, like, in the theater seeing trailers for it. So I feel it shouldn't be hidden gem, but it is because no one went and saw it for some dumb reason. You should watch it. But the opening scene, folks, the opening scene is the corpse of Daniel Radcliffe farting and propelling his body through the water, and Paul Dano rides it. Like,
uses it to escape the island.
Sits on the corpse and uses it to drive or like sail away. Propelled by a fart from a corpse.
Yeah.
The movie is fucking hilarious. It's one of the weirdest movies I've ever watched in my life. It's hilarious. I adore this movie so much. And I actually think, I won't spoil anything, but it has one of my favorite endings because of how unconventional the ending is. I
Yeah.
appreciate that ending so much. I love it. And I love just the whole story is awesome of how like Paul Dano is this guy learning it's okay to be weird and awkward, like find some connection. The connections you find, like that's okay. Obviously, we don't want you like getting too freaky with a corpse. That's wrong. Uh, but
Yeah.
he just kind of learns a lot of personal. Uh, I just lost the word. Like he learns a lot about himself through
Mhm.
this corpse. So you gotta check it out. It's so weird. I love Swiss Army Man so much, though. Like,
Yeah, it's one of the most interesting movies that is ridiculous and hilarious, but then also has a ton of heart and a
yeah,
ton of meaning and growth and emotion
there's
behind it.
a it packs a wallop. It really does pack a wallop. So,
Yeah.
but I love that movie so much. Like I could watch that movie any time of the day or week. I love Swiss Army Man.
Yeah, it's really, really good, especially if you have kind of a fucked up sense of humor, which I
Yep.
think we both do to some extent. I'm really wondering. So I watched it with my wife, and I forget what she said. So I want to know. I want to like see what she would say if I brought it up, because I think she would be like, "That fucking movie." I don't know. It was like when we saw Sausage
Yeah.
Party, and in the middle, she's like, "What the fuck are we watching?" It was
I mean,
basically that.
that's understandable, especially during the whole part where like the corpse gets a boner and is trying to figure out what a boner is.
Mhm.
I think every viewer of that movie would have a moment of like, what the fuck? Because I had that thought the first time
Yeah.
I saw it. Don't worry, folks, it's not a spoiler. Not a spoiler. But it's a
Yeah,
great part.
it's not a spoiler that he gets a boner.
Oh.
All right, my number four is a really interesting movie from a filmmaker that hasn't made a lot of movies. I think this is only her second feature and hasn't made anything much sense. So I'm interested to see what comes next. Um, but so my number four is called The Bad Batch,
Oh my
and it
god, really?
stars.
That's a weird
Yeah,
movie too.
it, it is a weird movie, but the more I watch it, the more I love it because it's one of the most it's such a deep movie that I think you can take a lot of different meanings from, and so that's a big part of it. The story on its surface is interesting and entertaining, but I think that you could draw a lot of different conclusions about human beings or society or just human nature from this movie. So it's a pretty interesting movie in that regard. And it's not related to the Star Wars animated series, The Bad Batch, just so you know. Very different kinds of movies. So it stars Suki Waterhouse, who's been in a handful of things, and she's really good in it. And then it kind of co-stars Jason Momoa and Keanu Reeves and a handful of other people. And the weird thing about it, it's kind of one of those sci-fi stories that I like. That's not like technologically sci-fi, but it's, I guess, socially sci-fi, where there's the American society has decided to create um, a kind of a prison, like an outdoor prison, where they've fenced off this giant desert and they just dump
Mm-hmm.
people into this desert that they're no longer American citizens once they're in there, and it's like a little, they're kind of marooned in the desert. Um, and so they have to survive there. And so these societies kind of form throughout the desert. And so the girl, Suki Waterhouse, gets dropped there, and first group she encounters are cannibals. So it's a very dark and serious movie where she ends up losing some limbs to the cannibals, but she ends up escaping. Don't worry, and uh, and then finds comfort, which is like this other society that Keanu Reeves' character has built up, and it's got like amenities and running water and like toilets and it's still shit. It's still like a garbage version of what's that what's that rave that like people
Why are
go and
you
do in the
asking,
desert
dude?
and
What?
do drugs. You are like the hippest guy I know. You should
Oh,
know
are you
what's
talking
that
about
rave
like?
that
So my brain.
And they always like wear
So I
costumes and
don't
do
know about
drugs
costumes,
and
but
have
my brain. Are you
sex.
talking about the one? My brain always like compares it to the Wicker Man with like the giant wicker where they set it on fire.
I wasn't. I wasn't thinking of the Wicker Man, but
But
that is
that like
kind of what
that's
I'm
what
thinking of. There's, yeah,
the
that festival in the
drugs,
desert
all the
that
drugs.
people go and do
Oh,
drugs and sex and
fucked. I
you
know
know
what you're.
that you know the one.
Burning Man. Burning Man.
Burning
Right?
Man.
Is that the one you were talking about?
So this whole
Did they
society,
burn like a giant
yes, thank
wooden
you.
man? I don't know. I thought I saw a picture of that.
It would be a lot
I'm
cooler
gonna
if they
look that
did.
up because I want to know why my brain
It is
like attributes Wicker Man
Burning
to
Man,
that.
Wicker Man. I think it's perfectly obvious. Wicker Man, they do burn a giant man, and it's
Oh,
called
that
Burning
might
Man.
be it.
So it's a direct line from A to B.
Well,
Makes
I'm
perfect
looking it
sense.
up, and now I'm
Um,
probably gonna be like, they do burn a big guy. Hey,
well, there you go. Are there
I
bees
hope not.
involved?
Bees. Why do it have to be
Not the
bees?
bees. I bet you didn't tune into this podcast thinking you'd get a Nick Cage impression, did you? So their society is kind of like Burning Man, which looks terrible, but and you anticipate that they must be the good guys, that the cannibals are the bad guys. These must be the good guys. But through the course of the movie, and the reason I love it so much is that Jason Momoa is a cannibal and he is a bad guy, and you never see Jason Momoa as a bad guy, so that's interesting just on a surface. But they end up kind of forming this girl and Jason Momoa kind of end up forming this bond or treating each other in a way that's better than the rest of people are treating each other in this prison, and so they end up kind of like it's kind of at the by the end of it, it's like the most fucked up romance story ever where like the music that plays it's kind of beautiful in its own weird way, but she doesn't have arms and he's a cannibal, and so it's just a weird thing.
It's
But
just a weird thing.
yeah, and Keanu Reeves is really fun in it, as this guy who runs this like he lives in like extravagance because he has set up this society, the best society in this whole wasteland. But he's also not that good of a guy either. So it's just a really interesting story with a lot of layers to it. And I think if you can handle someone's arms and legs getting chopped off and cooked up and eaten, then it's a really awesome movie.
Yeah, I saw it because I saw a still of Jim Carrey, and I remember thinking like, he can't be in that movie. This has to be one of those like troll things. But then I saw Jason Momoa was on it. I was like, what? It's an odd movie,
Yeah,
folks.
yeah.
It's one where like every time I'm scanning Netflix, it'll pop up, and I'm like, do I watch that? Nah. But it's on your list, so now
Yeah.
I feel compelled to watch it again.
I didn't even know Jim Carrey was the
Yeah.
Hermit. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
that was like that was what caught my interest, was seeing a still of him from that movie, and I thought it was just some weird like clickbait shit. And then I saw the movie on
Yeah.
Netflix and was like, well, we gotta see what this is up with, because I want to watch Jim Carrey. I think I saw it.
I don't think he has any
I think I
lines.
watched it when we were getting ready to do our Jim Carrey episode, or shortly after the Jim Carrey episode, because
Okay.
everything was Jim Carrey, all the searches, and every time you do that on like any of the streaming, they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you want to see more of this guy?" And you're like, "Well, not now. We did the episode, but
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's funny.
all right." My number 4 is the oldest movie on my list, which is not very old because it was made
Oh,
in
it's
2000. Um,
okay.
this is like one of those movies, massive cast, huge wide release. Actually, it had 2 wide releases. The first
Okay.
release wasn't going as well, and the studio got a little Oscar happy where they pulled it and then
Yeah.
re-released it to try and showcase all like the whole cast, and it didn't pan out. So it didn't get like any traction, which is a bummer because it's
Yeah.
it's just a a good movie. It's got Michael Douglas. It's got Tobey Maguire right before he became Spider-Man. It's got Robert Downey Jr. And I don't say this very often, and it feels weird saying this. You'll probably troll the shit out of
Okay.
me. That's okay.
All right.
It's a lovely film. It's like, I love this movie so much. I love how quiet it is.
Okay.
I love just some of the absurdity, which is not very much, but it's called Wonder Boys. It's got Michael, well, I already said the cast. It's from 2000. It's got Frances McDermott in it, which I'm not her biggest fan, especially as of recently. But she's still very enjoyable in this movie. But Michael Douglas plays this author who is also a college professor who like had this one huge book, and it's been years since he's had a follow-up. Robert Downey Jr. plays his publisher who is showing up for this writer's convention over this weekend, and Michael Douglas's character, his whole life kind of like spirals out of control. But that feels wrong to say because nothing really, oh, you left. Nothing really spirals. It like, it just gets a little goofy. So his life doesn't like really spiral. He just gets himself caught up in a few things. I won't say what they all are because they're all like super important to the plot of the film. But I love the quiet of this movie. And that like, it has a lot that happens. It's got very interesting characters. Tobey Maguire plays kind of the gothic, not your usual gothic looking college kid. He's just very quiet. He's very recluse. And he happens to be really good at writing, even if it's like super dark and depressing. And there's a whole scene where his introduction to the movie is Michael Douglas is reading his story out loud to the class and then asking for feedback on the story. And the whole class fucking hates his story. They hate it because it's so dark and it's depressing, except for one classmate who's Katie Holmes, who actually loved it and kind of makes a good valid point about it and stuff. But it's just, I love this movie. It's just, I love how quiet it is for the most part. I love the funny moments that are in it because they're perfectly placed. Honestly, I think had it had better marketing, this wouldn't be a hidden gem and it would be regarded as kind of a classic and be well known. But it had horrible marketing. But it's Michael Douglas is so good in it because he's never over the top. He's just kind of this older stoner college professor author. He smokes weed the whole time. It's like, that's the running gag of the movie. But I love this movie. It's another one of those where I feel really good when I watch it. And then on top of that, it ends on such a great note. Like, I'm not spoiling. Don't worry, folks. It's not a twisty kind of movie. But the way the movie moves and the way it ends leaves you as the viewer feeling like, okay, I need to get off my ass and do something. Like, it leaves you with that, which I love it when a movie leaves you with that feeling of like, okay, what am I going to do now? And I fucking love Wonder Boys. I watched this when I worked at Showtime, that video store back home. When I was in high school, thought it was like going to be just a whatever film. And just, I've been in love with this movie ever since. It's so good. It's so good. Jake, even though it's a drama comedy, so it's a dramedy, I think you would even appreciate a lot that's in it because it's not like touchy-feely drama.
Not heavy drama. A lot of crying involved.
No, there's like no crying involved, in fact. It's just, it's drama just based on ridiculous human situations that, for the most part, there's one situation that I don't think any of us would find ourselves in, but for the most part, you could see like, okay.
Yeah. It sounds really good. I've never seen it or even heard of it. So
I fucking love Wonder Boys. It's so good. Absolutely love that movie.
Okay, well, going from very feel good, enjoyable to very not feel good, very feel bad. This is
right.
One of the darker movies, probably the darkest, last dark movie on my list is this next one. And so it's from 2018. It's called Galveston, and I don't know if you've heard of it. Most people haven't.
I haven't even heard of that one.
Galveston.
Galveston?
It's directed by Melanie Laurent, who people would know as the actress who plays Shoshana in Inglourious Bastards.
Oh
It's apparently
shit.
she's directed several movies. This is her fourth feature film, the first one that she hasn't written, also, which is interesting to me because the writer of this movie is Nick Pizzolatto. I don't know how you say his name. It's Italian, but it's based on his novel, and he wrote the movie screenplay. People know him as the writer, producer, creator of True Detective. So very
Okay.
kind of Southern Gothic. It takes place in like New Orleans, I think, and he it stars Ben Foster and Elle Fanning, and so they are two people who are kind of thrown together when they find each other in this guy's house. She has like been there tied to a chair, and Ben Foster went in there to like kill the guy that was there or get money from him or something, and so one of my favorite things about it though is it deals with a lot of like heavy serious stuff like rape and just growing up poor and hard, and they go on the run together from these guys, and so it's a hard life story. A lot of Nick Pizzolata's stories are like kind of just hard, gritty, kind of Cormac McCarthy-esque stories,
Mm-hmm.
but it's done. I think that Melanie Laurent directs it in a really interesting way, where the shootouts and the rape and things like that, she doesn't focus on that. She focuses on something else. She focuses on the character doing the shooting as opposed to the people being shot and stuff. And so it's done in a really interesting way. And the story is kind of a long form story where they're together for a little while, but it then shows like 30 years down the road the impact that they had on each other's lives, and and how that relationship actually mattered, and all this stuff, because they end up
Mm-hmm.
picking up her like little sister at her stepdad's house and taking her with them. So now he's lugging these two girls around as they're on the run, kind of. Um, and so how that little girl was affected by their interactions in the short time they had together, and it's a really really good movie. Their relationships are really interesting, and kind of like platonic and fatherly in a way as well. um, so it's really really good. The crazy thing is it's one of the most hidden gems for sure. The worldwide gross was less than 250,000.
Yeah, I've never heard of this, and I feel like a jackass because Ben Foster is one of those
Mhm.
actors to me where every time I see his name, whether he's like super supporting
Yeah.
character or whatever, as soon as I see his name, I'm like, oh, that movie's gonna be great. Just like immediately, like, oh, Ben Foster's in it. He's gonna be a powerhouse. Like this dude is gonna
Yeah.
own this film, and the movie will be
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and Elle Fanning's one of those
Oh, I feel
actresses that
like,
who has been way too good, way too young, and she continues to be great. I don't think it was even submitted for an MPAA rating. I'm pretty sure.
no, it has
Yeah,
no
so that's
rating.
partly, I think, contributes to why it was less known.
I need to try and find this movie. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it right now.
We're doing a show, Dustin.
I know, but I'm super. Oh my god, that sounds so
Yeah, it
good.
is really good. That's why it's my number three.
That's a good number three. Oh man. Um, my number three, I think you will appreciate a hell
Okay.
of a lot because anything that like goes against the government
Yeah,
control, I know you're a
that's
fan
true.
of. And this is it's loosely based on true events from the
Okay.
1960s about uh, the UK government
Hmm.
trying to chokehold or put a chokehold finishing move. Look at that
I'm
wrestling
wearing a
reference
wrestling
for
shirt
you.
right now. The
Uh,
Ultimate Warrior.
so my number three is all like centered around music and just what it does to people, how it makes people feel, especially in the 60s when like rock and roll was really booming and becoming not just like, ooh, some new kind of get you out of your comfort zone style music, but people were using it to cope and using it to feel free and all
Yeah.
this stuff. So my number 3 is a movie called Pirate
Okay.
Radio. And it's loosely based on events in the UK where the United Kingdom's government was trying to
Mhm.
ban rock and roll from radio play. And there were these ships, literal like boats out in the
Yeah.
ocean that were anchored offshore who were rock and roll radio
Yeah.
stations.
Broadcasting.
And so they played this in spite of the government. They fought all the rules that the government was trying to oppress them with. They kept finding loopholes to win. The movie itself is about this one specific boat and this 18-year-old guy who his mom sends him to the boat to spend time with his godfather to get away from like all the trouble that he's getting himself into on the mainland. But they even make a joke in the movie of like, your mom sent you to a boat full of rock and roll DJs where we just like embrace the rock and roll lifestyle.
Yeah.
What the fuck? But it uses music so perfectly, and it's like they show these friendships, and it's very relational, but it's a comedy. It's a straight comedy. It's very funny, and it's got one of the craziest casts ever. Philip Seymour Hoffman plays the only American DJ there. His character is called the Count. He is my favorite character. He is amazing. Nice. I love his character so much. But you got Bill Nye is in it. You've got Nick Frost in it. There's so many more. Hold on. It's also called The Boat That Rocked. Yeah. That was another title it was given, but I think that's the title in the UK. The title here is Pirate Radio. It's Nick Frost, Charlie Rowe. Now I'm not finding anyone. Anyone that watched the IT Crowd. So it's got Catherine Parkinson and Chris O'Dowd. They're in it. And it's fun watching them work together because they're polar opposite characters of what they are on the IT Crowd, which is amazing. But I love... Oh, and it's got Kenneth Branagh is the government dude who's trying to shut down. He's a total prick. Like, fuck that guy. But you're supposed to hate him. But I love this movie so much. It's another one of those movies where when it ends, you really do want to just be like, yeah. But not like no, you do. You just want to like, fuck everyone else. I'm going to do my own thing. Like, that's what the movie gives you a sense of, but in a positive light. And I love Pirate Radio. It's so good. And plus, 1960s rock and roll, you get to rock out to it for 2 hours, and it's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that movie coming out, and I was definitely interested in it, but it kind of came and went, and I forgot about it. And the idea of pirate radio has always interested me. Like, I remember learning about it as a kid. I was like, you could do that, just broadcast radio wherever, and especially in international waters where you're trying to avoid the like FCC or whoever it is in the UK.
Right.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that movie is another one that it hits that chord every time I watch it. Pun intended, but I love that movie. It's good. A gem.
My number 2 is a horror movie. I don't know if it's necessarily up your alley. It's not like a violent horror movie. There's no blood.
Is it Cults?
It's not Cults.
Are you bringing up Cults?
No, I'm not bringing up Cults. So it might be more your style than the last several I've made you watch. And it's the most recent movie on my list. Came out in 2020, but I can already tell that it's the movie that's kind of going to be lost to time, and it should be. It was really, really good when I saw it. Like, surprisingly good. Like, I was like, oh, this is going to do something cliche, and then it never did. It was really interesting. So it's called The Night House, and it stars Rebecca Hall.
That just came out,
2020,
didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it was this year, but it was probably 2 years ago. But it has Rebecca Hall. So it's directed by David Bruckner, who did the incredible The Ritual that I love so much.
So they made it in 2020, but it just released like this
Oh, was
year
it
due to all the
one of
COVID
the ones that
stuff.
kept getting pushed
I
back?
Yeah, I almost went and saw it at the theater, and I just didn't get around to watching it. I forget what else came out, but I really wanted to see this
Yeah,
movie.
it's really good.
Like, really
It's
wanted
really
to see
good
this.
and really interesting. It's a different kind of ghost story, I think. Um, but she thinks it's ghosts. You don't really know what's going on. And the investigation, like you said before, the investigation of the supernatural happenings or experiences is really interesting because it's this woman, Rebecca Hall, who does a great job. Her husband recently killed himself, and so she's grieving, obviously. She's trying to deal with her grief and also starts discovering new things about him that she didn't know before. Seems like he might have been a completely different person. So that whole part is really kind of interesting. But she also is experiencing these dreams or visions or potentially supernatural happenings in her house. And so you don't know if it's because she's grieving or she hasn't had sleep or if it's actually happening. And then you don't know if it's like a demon that like made her husband kill herself. Like you don't really know what's going on the whole time, and it keeps you
Mhm.
interested. You keep learning new things, and everything you learn, you're like, oh, that's crazy, that's interesting, that's new. And so it never really does kind of what you think it will do or the cliche thing, which is why I really liked it. And it ended, and I was
Yeah.
like, don't ruin the ending, don't ruin the ending, and it didn't.
Yeah, don't
I,
ruin the
I
ending.
enjoyed the ending, so I think that it did a good
Sweet.
job overall. So I was very impressed with it.
Yeah, I really wanted to get around to it. I think it came out, though. It came out with like a big movie, and it totally just got
Mm.
lost. I can't remember what I went and saw, but it was one of those where I was like, I really wanted to see that, and then it was gone.
Yeah.
Man, it's your number two.
Yeah,
Oh
I
man, it
I
must
was
be
very like
fucking
impressed
awesome.
by it. Yeah.
Well, my number two is technically also a horror film,
Okay.
although it never feels super like horror to me. It's only horror and aspect of like the monsters that are in it, but the movie just feels like a really well made
Mm.
film. I've talked about it to everyone I know, including my daughter. I was just telling her about it, trying to convince her to watch it with me, but she was like, "Dad, I'm not watching that." And I was like, "Ah!" I know I've like mentioned it to you a handful of times. Um, One thing I've learned, especially after we started this
Mhm.
show, is I think I'm a bigger Ethan Hawke fan than I ever thought I was.
Yeah.
Because every time I watch him in a movie, I'm like, I love this guy. Like in every role he's in, I'm like, I love Ethan
Yeah.
Hawke. And I'm like, okay, I think I need to watch more of his early stuff. Uh, but I had to laugh because this will make like two or three, maybe even three or four of his movies that have been on one of my top tens.
Okay.
And I'm like, what is up with this dude? I just love his
Yeah.
films. But anyways, this movie, it's my favorite vampire movie
Mm.
ever. It's so
Mhm.
cool and it's so interesting to me. I love the whole story of it, but it's called
Yeah.
Daybreakers. It's got Ethan Hawke, Willem Dafoe, and Sam Neill. And it's such an interesting story. So it's about vampires have emerged. They've kind of overtaken the world. They're all businessmen, they're politicians, they're everywhere, and the human race is on the verge of extinction because the vampires have drank humans
Yeah.
dry. And Ethan Hawke plays a scientist who works at this huge vampire pharmaceutical
Mhm.
company who is trying to develop a blood synthetic because real blood is running out. So they're trying to figure out a way to survive. But he's also a vampire who hates being a vampire and like wishes he could be human. So he doesn't drink human blood.
Okay.
He only drinks like all this fake shit, or at least uh like toned down blood, if you
Yeah.
will, kind of watered down. Um, but he's like trying to find kind of his own piece through being a vampire. His brother is in the military, which is all ran by vampires. Sam Neill plays his boss, who's a cliche, greedy pharmaceutical
Yeah.
douche. Uh, but he ends up running into a group of humans who claim they have the cure for vampires. And the movie is all about him kind of being with these humans and learning what they're trying to do behind the scenes while he's also trying to survive himself. Because the vampires, it gives an interesting tweak to the vampire thing where, due to lack of blood supply and feeding, they turn into like the big winged monsters and become these monstrous creatures. It's a cool movie. It looks cool. It's super gothic, but like modern, but you get a very gothic feel to it. I love Daybreakers. I'm like, this is my favorite vampire movie. I love vampires. I think they're badass. This is my favorite version of them.
Wow.
They're so cool. I love how it does it. I love Daybreakers so much.
I remember coming out, and I got the impression from the trailer that it was going to be like just very generic, like mundane movie.
Yeah.
So I never saw it.
And it should be mundane, and there's parts of it that would be mundane, but there's something about it that just every time I watch it, I'm like, this is just cool. Like they look cool. They even do like the whole mythos of vampires having no reflection. So there's a shot of his rear view mirror when he's driving up in a car, and all you see is like the suit.
Yeah.
But you don't see him. And I was like,
attention to detail.
I feel like, yeah, I was like, what a great little thing to keep like old school mythos with the vampires. Sunlight kills them, you know.
Yeah.
So when they drive around the day, their cars are all made to have like these cameras, and the whole car blacks itself out if they have to drive during the day. There's like this whole alarm system set up by the government of like, sunrise is in an hour, you need to get home.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
But it's just, I love that movie so much. It's so cool. And I'm like, more people, especially vampire fans, I'm like, more vampire fans should be watching this movie because it's just a cool fucking movie.
Yeah.
Plus, it's Sam Neill. Sam Neill is like a greedy, evil, sinister vampire boss.
Yeah. That sounds great.
But he does it really well.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. All right. We're at number 1. So
I can't believe
my number 1 hidden gem movie is from 2018, and it's just a really cool sci-fi movie. It's not as dark as everything else that I've talked about. No rape involved, don't worry. But the concepts are, if you think about them too hard, it's very, very like scary, I guess, or disturbing. It's on the level of like dark sci-fi, like Black Mirror. This is that kind of movie, and part of the reason why I like it because I think Black Mirror is some of the best sci-fi ever. So it's called Upgrade, and it's the crazy thing to me. I didn't know until I started looking into it. It's written and directed by Lee Wanell, who is that guy?
He did the Saw series.
He's the guy who plays Adam in the first Saw, who's like is in the room with
he's
Carrie
also
Ells,
like the co-creator of that whole thing,
which is insane to
he
me.
like co-wrote or directed.
Yeah,
it's one of those.
And apparently, he's going to do direct the Escape from New York remake, so that should be interesting.
They're remaking Escape from New York.
Apparently, breaking news. Yeah, he's.
Why? That movie's so much fun. Other conversation.
Yeah, but Upgrade is such an awesome kind of sci-fi story. So it centers around this guy played by Logan Marshall Green who doesn't like technology really. He's just like a normal guy. They live in a world where you have like self-driving cars and fully smart houses and everything's fully sci-fi, but he's still like working on like Dodge Chargers and tries to live as least technological life as he possibly can. And his girlfriend or wife or somebody, she works for like a big tech company, so she's all about it. So they're kind of like always joking, haha, isn't it funny how you don't like technology? And then they end up getting in like a car crash, and she ends up getting killed, and he ends up getting paralyzed, and then he goes under this like agrees to do this experimental procedure where he will get implanted with this like bug, which is like an AI to control his body, but uh, it allows him to walk. It allows him to not be paralyzed anymore. But he starts to hear the AI talk to him, and they like have like conversations back and forth. And so he has to like occasionally give up control to the AI so that the AI can like fight for him because it knows like more than he does, and it's like can just like respond faster than him. And so
I get what you mean with the Black Mirror. Everything you're saying, I'm like, this is a bad idea.
yeah,
like everything.
yeah. And so it's really interesting. They start like working together because they think that the car crash, because the smart car that crashed, it shouldn't have like malfunctioned or whatever. So they think that it might have been like a murder. So he's trying to hunt down who might have murdered his wife and paralyzed him. And so there's like a mystery involved, and they're trying to solve it together. And there's like, it's a really really interesting and crazy movie. There's a lot of really big implications about the technology and the things that it can do and can't do, and what the guy who gives him this artificial intelligence is trying to do. But I love the story. I love how it evolves and the mystery of it, and how they end up working together. The action is really cool. It's one of those movies that is it's pretty fun overall. Like it's never too dark or too serious. He's a really interesting guy who does a good job of keeping things kind of lighter and more fun. But the story is great, and the ending is really good. It's one of those things that you are worried that it's going to do something super cliche, and then it doesn't, and it's a really solid ending. So I like Upgrade a lot, and it's one of the most hidden gems that I've seen in a long time.
I remember the preview for it, but I don't remember it actually coming out.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've heard you talk about it a handful of times, and it sounds super intriguing. I'm a Black Mirror fan as well, as you know,
Yeah.
even though that show scares the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
Because like some of this could be real. Don't roll your eyes, folks. We're already going in direction of several Black Mirror episodes. So
Yeah.
some countries have already turned Black Mirror episodes into reality.
Yeah.
Looking at you, China. Man, the whole dependency on technology.
Mhm.
Whew, whew. I get like we have to right now because we're remote.
Yeah.
You know, being a few states away kind of forces you to do this shit. But
Yeah.
you and I are '90s boys, so I still long and always miss those days of like not having a phone.
Yeah.
Where it was simply like you set plans and you had to use like a landline. You had to just go out and deal with whatever the day had. You couldn't have social media to do whatever. I miss those days. The technology dependency is freaky because we're all dependent on it. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I gotta check out Upgrade though.
You do. It's great.
It sounds like such a bad idea that I have to watch it. Not the movie, but like the whole idea. Go ahead and plant AI into me.
Right.
Well, my number one is the other heist movie that I mentioned earlier. So I end my 10 on a very fun, very just enjoyable note. In fact, it might be one of the most enjoyable heist movies I have ever watched.
Okay.
I actually think it rivals Ocean's 11 in being an enjoyable heist film.
Okay.
And Ocean's 11 from Steven Soderbergh, that whole cast, that whole movie is gold.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, folks. But this movie, also directed by Steven Soderbergh, I feel like is just more enjoyable, or at least rivals it, because it's just so silly and it's just fun. Huge cast. It's got Daniel Craig. It's got Adam Driver. It's got Channing Tatum, and directed by Steven Soderbergh.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the funniest heist movies I've ever seen. It's just so... It's so much fun. It's called Logan Lucky. I remember the trailers being out.
Yeah.
It generated like no audience. It didn't gain a whole lot. No one's ever heard of it. I don't get why,
Hmm.
because it has huge names that have huge fan bases,
Right.
and then no one's watched this movie. But Logan Lucky is like, it's so good. So it's about Channing Tatum plays this construction worker, and it takes place in the South, like in West Virginia.
Hmm.
And he plays this construction worker. He's a single dad who's having to make child support payments and stuff, take care of his own. His ex-wife is remarried to this big, like, super rich guy, which fans of The Office will recognize Roy.
Yeah.
He's not a douche. His character is not douchey. He just happens to be rich. He does have some douche moments in it, but it's not like Roy douchiness. It's just rich guy douchiness moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Katie Holmes plays the ex-wife, and Channing Tatum gets fired, and he has to figure out how to. He's got to have money, and his brother is played by Adam Driver, who's a one-armed war vet who runs a bar,
Hmm.
and Daniel Craig plays this known thief who's incarcerated that
Yeah.
they go to team up with to like hack this plan to rob a speedway during one of the biggest races of the year. So
Hmm.
it's just this cast: Adam Driver, Daniel Craig, and Channing Tatum. I say this almost every episode with at least one movie where I'm like, these people need to work together more often.
Yeah.
And it'll probably never happen, but these three need to
Yeah.
work to. These three should be a Hollywood team
Yeah.
constantly. They work so perfectly together. And the heist is super awesome because it's complicated, but at the same time, it's actually really simple. And
Yeah.
I appreciate all the steps that they go through to make it. There's a lot of comedy to it. And it's just, I fucking love this movie so much. But I think what the selling point is, what makes it my number one, is the super sentimental reason.
Okay.
It's the relationship between Channing Tatum's character and his daughter.
Yeah.
It's one of those parent-child relationships where I'm like, this is what it should always be. Whether you're a split family or not, this is the kind of relationship parents should strive to have with their children.
Yeah.
And I love how they show it in this movie. And they even show the split family, Channing Tatum and his ex, actually being really healthy
Right.
for the most part. And there's even parts of it where I was like, oh shit, this feels too real to me, because one of the parts of the movie is, and it's not a spoiler, but like the ex-wife, the new husband, and the child wanting to move to a different state, and he's going to have to follow them.
Yeah.
I was like, I had forgotten that little detail, and then I rewatched it and was like, what the fuck? It's like, oh, folks, if you don't know, I did that.
Yeah. That's really funny.
But Logan Lucky, I'm like, every time I watch it, and when I rewatched it the other night, when it ends, every time I'm like, this might be one of like the most perfect calm comedy heist films. Like, it's almost a perfect film, just in the sense that you feel just entertained.
Yeah.
Like, it hits that mark so perfectly and so dead on. And so many movies get so close, but this one, 100% across the board. It's so good. So
Yeah.
Logan Lucky.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's incredible and one of the most enjoyable movies. I might watch it tonight because it's been a long time since I've seen it. I just remember it was so fun, and you're right. The cast is amazing. That team is so random that those you don't think of Channing Tatum anywhere near the same conversation as Adam Driver, and you don't think of them anywhere near the conversation.
Right.
And so it's like just such a random team up, but it works so well as these like
Yeah.
random guys that are they feel like they're characters, and they're wholesome and they're fun. And yeah, I totally agree. The story and the family aspect is really beautiful. And it's a fun. I never thought of it as being compared to Ocean's 11, but it follows that kind of like pacing and it's a
Yeah.
fun time with a planned out thing that goes wrong or needs to be changed, and it's great.
Yeah. It's such a gem. Like, it really is a gem to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's a good one. All right,
Man, there it is.
there
Our
you go.
top 10.
Our top 10, our first one of probably a handful of these.
Because there's so many hidden
Do you
gems out there.
do you have hidden or honorable mentions
I do have honorable mentions. I do.
that you're not going to say for a future episode?
Oh, shit. Should we save them?
Well, so
Oh,
I did a
no.
weird thing with my honorable mentions where I have certain movies that I want to continue to like champion, like to continue to like
Yep.
bring up and get out there. I've done that with the Raid for years, and I feel like people know more about the Raid now, so I've kind of retired it. But I have other movies that I just continue to say, watch this, and so
Yep.
those they've all come up on the show before in my other top tens. So that's kind of my way of cheating them into my list. But so I'm not going to steal any of my future gems for it.
You know what? I agree with you. Let's, for the second time, but the first time on purpose, let's hold off on the honorables, because I am with you. I feel like you said it really well, Justin, of champion for like some of these movies. And I feel you and I have been champion for almost every movie we talk about.
Yeah.
Minus like Mulholland Drive or our top 10 hated list.
Yeah.
Fuck Mulholland Drive. That movie is just so.
Yeah, I will probably never watch it again.
But yeah, I think that's like really kind of been the like one of the aspects or the core of the show is we just keep like champion for these movies. So I think we hold off on honorable mentions, and at some further down the road slate, we'll do another more movies we're champion about.
Yeah, more hidden gems.
People need to watch more hidden stuff because there's so many. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was unreal how many I had.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, like I said, I really wanted to get into like 90s comedies that people have forgotten that are way back there, or even like action dramas or crime stuff. So there's so many good movies that people need to get back to, especially the next generation. Like you said last time, that there are people these days don't even know who Sylvester Stallone is. So that we'll have a lot of things for the new generation to go back and watch.
Jake is still determined to get people to side with him on Judge Dredd.
Sylvester Stallone is an icon. That's all I'm saying.
The sign right here, man.
All right. Let's just end the episode. Keith Urban is not better than Sylvester Stallone.
You know what? I have to get this out, so we'll end it on this.
Okay.
I'm going to do my quick rant. Okay?
Oh, okay.
I have to do my quick rant. I have to.
I'm ready.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Now, some of this, Jake, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, Dustin's given me this rant before. Not necessarily with this character, but since the Batman has come out, and you and I we love the film. I've seen it a few times now. Like, I adore everything about it. Talking about it was, so I found out I've got some Batman fans at work.
Nice.
And we get emotional nerd talk into it where it's like super passionate like you and I do, and it's fun and like old coworkers and friends, and I love that. But I am seeing more and more, and I think it's taking away kind of the core importance of like not just Batman as a character or comic book movies as a thing, just enjoying stuff. I think it's taken away from just enjoying the movies. This whole idea of we have to compare who's the worst, who's the best. We have to compare what movies suck, what movie, like I get we compare movies, but we love way more movies than we hate movies.
Yeah.
Which I think is healthy. But I'm going to focus on Batman because I'm seeing a lot of stuff of people being like, the Nolan trilogy sucks. It's horrible. It doesn't stand up. Correct yourselves, folks. I just rewatched the trilogy not that long ago. It stands up just fine.
Yeah, it will forever. That's one of the most ridiculous statements I've ever heard.
And so does like the first two Tim Burton films. The only Batman movies that don't really hold up are Batman Forever and Batman and Robin.
Right.
But that's to be expected because they are just not good movies.
Right.
A lot of potential wasted.
Hmm.
Pattinson is amazing as Batman. I think he is like the perfect embodiment. I think this movie is the perfect embodiment of everything we've gotten before, all rolled up and put into one.
Yeah.
But, folks, who gives a fuck of who's the worst or who's the best? Like,
Yeah.
what Batman connects to you is that's going to be your favorite one. Just let the character connect to you. Don't say because you like. You and I are big Affleck fans. I'm a huge Bale fan. Like
Yeah.
all three Batmans. Actually, my daughter asked me which Batman's your favorite, and I was like, dude, I honestly can't put a number one
Right.
because I love Keaton because that's so nostalgic. I love Affleck because it's so comic book accurate. I love Bale because it's so human, and I love
Yeah.
Pattinson because it's all of it into one dude.
Yeah.
Like they do it all perfect. So I'm just tired of this mentality of we have to compare. We can't just enjoy.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a huge loss of respect for everything that has set up for the success of this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm only using the Batman because it's the most current example.
Right.
But I'm like, people, just enjoy the films.
Hmm.
Like I can still love the Dark Knight trilogy, and I can still love Ben Affleck's performance as Batman equally. I can love them equally.
Right.
Guess what? I do. You can't see
Right.
him, but I've got Ben Affleck's Batman hanging on my wall right there, and I've got Bale right here. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a Pattinson Batman to put up somewhere. But
Yeah.
like I think our pop culture mentality is just too focused on not just enjoying things and just embracing the future of stuff. Or we embrace the future without realizing we have to respect the past. I think people need to respect the past way more to get the full
Hmm.
whatever. Anyways, that's my rant. I'm so tired of seeing these like
Yeah.
comparisons and let's shit on everything that came before. This is the only one that matters. Like that doesn't really work a lot of the time.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that too. Like immediately, it was like this is better than Bale, or it's not as good as Bale, or whatever. I get it. He's kind of the bar at that point where
Yeah.
everybody had agreed up to that point that it was the best version of Batman. That they all liked that. General popular culture liked that. So is this better or worse than that? They're trying to find out, and that's fine. But I think it's also a sign or an indicator of the overall culture or overall media of everything is the best, everything is the worst, and it's
Yeah.
not like somewhere in between where everything actually is. And
We can't just enjoy shit. It's like Rotten Tomatoes has become
yeah,
aware. It's become self-aware in humans.
that's terrifying. That's absolutely terrifying. But yeah, you're absolutely right, and I've seen that appreciation for what came before is I think should be a big part of it. Exactly like you were saying, where we wouldn't have Pattinson be as good as he is if we didn't have all these other people to feed into that.
Right.
And same thing for I was thinking as I was watching the Batman how much this movie and its just style and ambiance wouldn't have existed without the Joker having done that and been successful at having just that dirty, grimy Gotham that's like just socially different than anything we've ever seen before.
Yeah.
And the Batman takes that and kind of expands on it and makes it even better. So that's
Dude, I even saw an article saying that Heath Ledger's Joker was like not good in comparison to Paul Dano's Riddler. And I was like, hold up. Two different characters.
yeah.
But what kind of audacity do you have to like suddenly shit on this character or this performance? I'm going to say the performance
Yeah.
that people have been. I mean, Heath Ledger Joker is the bar for like every villain, whether it's comic book villain or not. Every villain is now.
Right.
We have to strive for that excellence.
Right.
Why would you suddenly? And this is like a big tell for me to current times. Suddenly turn your back and be like, oh, it's horrible. That's he sucks compared to this. No.
Yeah.
Paul Dano, Matt Reeves, the whole crew, everyone has come out and been like, no, we are all inspired by everything that came forward. We're just hoping to build on top of it and kind of do our own take on it. And they're doing an amazing job. But not just with Batman, but just like we've had it with like Bond. You and I had a whole who's our favorite Bond, and yeah, I'm not a George Lazenby fan, but we're on Her Majesty's Secret Service fan.
Yeah.
But when I watch Bond, I watch all 27 movies. I don't skip any of them. I watch the
Right.
entire thing because I'm like, I want to soak in from beginning to current time, because I think it gives you a deeper appreciation for what we're able to do now, or what we're able to see
Right.
now. Comic book, the MCU wouldn't exist,
Yeah.
at least on the kind of stage that it's on, without the Nolan trilogy
Oh yeah.
completely changing the game. Like,
Right.
it just wouldn't.
Yeah. Before that, comic book movies were generally jokes. There were not any serious good comic book movies that pop culture actually liked in a significant way.
But yeah, so my rant is, I think we've just gotten, or not we, but I think people have gotten too caught up in this whole, we have to compare everything. Just fucking enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, just...
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's hard to know what to do about that. Like, how do you combat that? I think it's a sign of, or it's caused by our sensationalist media that are throwing out extreme opinions for clickbait. If they say something ridiculous, you'll click on it to say, how can that possibly be that Heath Ledger's Joker is not as good? And so if you don't click on it, if feed the trolls, maybe they'll go away. I don't know, but that's not a good
You know what? That's good advice. If there's anything to come from today's episode, folks, don't feed the trolls.
Yeah.
Don't buy into their shit. Just don't do it. Don't click on those articles. I have not clicked on those articles. I don't click on comment sections because I think it's all just cesspool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my rant was just like, folks, you're missing like the biggest key to all of this, whether it's Batman or anything else. Like, just enjoy it. I'm going to use Dredd as the example. Yes, I like Dredd, the 2012, way more than I do the 95.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there has to be a healthy understanding that 2012 Dredd probably wouldn't have gotten made, probably wouldn't have had the same kind of cult following that it has.
Yeah.
Had there not been the 95 version first.
Yeah. And had the opportunity to see what the first one did, know what fans were critiquing about it, and fix those mistakes in the remake. Yeah. So, yeah, I agreed.
See? Look at that. I even helped defend your movie, even though I still win.
Thank you. Finally. I
Carl
expect those to be gone next week.
Dredd's the best. Dredd
you get 1 week of gloating, and then those have to come down.
They're all temporary. You know that. But so that's my rant, folks.
Yeah.
Stop comparing. Just go and enjoy the movies. Respect where the movies have come from. Maybe you folks should go revisit classics.
Yeah. Right. That's what I think. Rant. All right. I'm glad we got it. I'm glad we got the rant.
I had to. Hey, I kept it short.
Yeah, not
a few minutes. Next week is one movie, right? We're deep diving into a movie that was mentioned in the very first episode we ever did. We're revisiting The Edge with Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
And I'm
great adventure movie.
I love this movie. I know you absolutely love this movie. And I'm excited to talk about this movie.
I'm excited to revisit it because it has been so long since our first episode, and I know there are a lot of things I didn't get to talk about in that episode because we were trying to keep it short and sweet. So to dedicate a full episode to it.
It's like 4.5 hours long.
We were figuring it out.
We were. But go watch The Edge, folks. Excellent survival adventure film. It's intense. It's kind of a crazy story. Watch that because we're going to be diving pretty heavily into it next week. So obviously we're spoiling the shit out of it. And that's all I got.
All right. Check you guys later.